Today we're talking about Linq, or LINQ, which stands for Language Integrated Query, which is a really fascinating subsystem of C#, and there's a lot of depth to it. You can talk about mapping Linq into SQL, into data sets, into XML, and into objects, especially things like lists that are organized as records, where you have collections within the list. But we don't really want to go into that kind of depth for this tutorial. We just want it to be sort of an introduction to Linq, where I write a program that displays the directory's contents ordered by file length. And the program I'm using to write this has a form that's actually pretty wide, that has a list box and a text box that just shows the directory that's been selected. And then we have an ordered by size button, which brings up a folder browser dialog, and you select a directory, and then the list box will show the files in that directory organized by length. And the program to do this is quite short. It has shows the dialog box for the folder browser dialog, instantiates the object and shows the dialog box. And then if the user's pressed OK, so he has selected a folder, we put the selected path of that folder into the text box that shows the path, and then we call a function, sort by size, using the selected path. And then the sort by size really only has one statement, and that statement is a LINQ statement, or Linq statement. I'm not sure whether they pronounce it, which way they pronounce it, but this has a var, which acts pretty much like var in JavaScript, and that it can be of any type. It's an implicitly typed statement. And then you have a formatted statement which is very similar to SQL. You have from file name in file names, and file names is an array of files that's gotten with a directory.get files, in this case using the path we passed as a parameter. And then it says order by, and then I do a new file info file name. So we're actually invoking file info and looking at the .length property, and then saying sort that ascended. So we have an order by statement, and you have a select file name. And if you sort of reorganize this statement, it looks a lot like saying select fn from fns, where fn would be a field and fns would be a table name, and then order by as a clause, and then you have length, which would be a field within the record, and then descending. We'd use DESC in conventional SQL instead of spelling out the word descending. But you see, it really is totally related to the structured query language. It's just ordered in a funny way. And then we do a for each statement. And if you think in terms of SQL in MySQL and PHP, this statement here is a lot like the MySQL query, where you're defining the query and then you get a return value that's an array of rows, and then within the PHP you'd have a MySQL fetch array, which goes through each of the records in turn, and the for each is doing essentially the same thing. It's getting a string because our original type is an array of strings of curve file, and then it's using our implicitly defined type with the var, which is now an array of strings because of the implicit definition from the original data. And in turn is loading these into the cur file variable. And then I want to get the file name from cur path, so I'm using a path.getFilename of the cur file in order to just get the file name, because if I use the cur file as we get it, it'll include the entire path, which is, for one thing, the file name itself is so big I need an extra large form, and with the path it just gets outrageous. But in order to use the file info and I think the path, you need the system.io. But interestingly, the system.linq or Linq, which you need to use the Linq statement, comes pre-packaged whenever you create a form in the IDE. So you're always getting Linq, even though we almost never use it. This is the first time I've ever used it in a video. So let's compile and run this and see if it works. Go to get a directory and get the folder browser dialog, and go down to I guess say Nadia and Carmel. Click OK, and here we have a series of PDF files. And this, since we said descending, this is the smallest one, this is the next smallest, and so on. This is the largest one here. And that's kind of cool, but we'd have to go in and look at the properties of each of the files to verify that those are actually that length. So I actually wrote a variation on this program. And in this variation we do directory info di. It's instantiated on a directory info class. And then we do di.getFiles and get an array of file info instead of an array of strings using the directory .getFiles. So we now have an array of file info, and we're using essentially the same Linq statement with the implicitly typed variable size ordered files, but this time it's going to be an array of file info because of the original data that's being passed in. So you see where this changes based on the data that gets put in. And then I do a list box clear, and then I iterate through the file info array with the same for each type statement. But this time I can do a curfile.name to get the file name, the short name, and I can use a curfile.length.toString, and I'm using the quotation mark 0, quotation mark custom format, so that'll put nice zeros every 3 digits, so it'll be easier to read the length. And putting parentheses around that and spacing it over a bit and so on for formatting. So if we compile and run this, it looks like essentially the same program. Actually, it is essentially the same program with a different data type. And we do order by size and go to the same file or the same directory. And this time we have the length specified after the files. And you see, even with this extended length, I have to go over a bit to see the biggest one. We got 161,000 as the first one, 3,049,000 as the second one, and so on. The last one being 6,310,000. So they are indeed ordered by length based on that LINQ statement. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a lot. There's a lot to get into with Linq. I don't know if I'll get into it that much more, because really I just wanted to solve this specific problem. But it's a fascinating subsystem of C#. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe. And I'll see you next lesson.